Do we all just read the same books? Is Booktube just one massive echo chamber where we read the same books and repeat the same ideas back to each other over and over? Do we exclude certain authors? Well, maybe to some extent. Hi, I'm the book guy. Now, I recently got tagged in a video by Nick Reads Fantasy about how all of the top 10 fantasy videos that we see on Booktube often just list the same books over and over. And it's pretty true. Nick listed the same 17 book series that I just sort of talked about over and over in an endless cycle on Booktube, and I think it's pretty on point. So, do we all just read the same books over and over again? Today, I want to add to this conversation, not to agree or disagree, but to discuss further, because this is a complex topic, and there are many contributing factors to why Booktube seems to present the same books over and over. There is no one simple, single answer. Remember, you should always be skeptical if you see someone take a complex topic and try to reduce it down to one simple answer. That's called an intellectual shortcut, and it's almost always a bad idea. This is a complex situation with many complex contributing factors. We're going to go through them all today. Now, when Nick made his video, he suggested there are 3 reasons why we keep talking about the same books over and over again. And I'm not just going to repeat his points in my video. That's just straight up stealing content. You can go watch his video if you want to know more. But I just want to highlight his 3 big reasons were the echo chamber effect, the fact that adaptions lead to popularity, and therefore we talk about those books, and the bell curve theory, suggesting that most books are of average quality, and there are very few that actually make their way to the top. But I just want to touch on that quickly so you know why I'm not discussing about those points, because they've already been made elsewhere. And not to brag, but today I have 13 points. Again, it's a complex topic, and I'm not good at letting things go. I'm no Elsa. Hey! So before we discuss why does all of Booktube read the same books over and over again, I just want to put a couple of disclaimers up front. First of all, I am not an ultimate authority on this. This is not a video essay where I'm presenting facts. This is a discussion. My goal today is to get you thinking. Think! I want to make you more aware of the innate biases that are affecting all of Booktube and how it decides which books rise to the top and how we choose what books to read. Let me also add a disclaimer that I'm not here to question the books that usually do make it to the top. I'm not going to call them overrated or attack them in any way. They're all great. And one last disclaimer, I'll be sharing a little bit from my own experience as a booktuber today. This is not to boast about myself or complain about my life. I'm just using a relevant example, okay? There'll be a bit of me today. Okay, so why do we all read the same books? Reason number 1, clickbait. Oh, clickbait is the bane of my existence. Gotham is yours! So if you look on my channel, my 3 most popular videos are about Malazan, Game of Thrones, and Lord of the Rings. Now, are those 3 my best videos? Probably not, to be frank, but they are 3 of the most popular topics on Booktube. I know on Booktube, there's a lot of pressure to be authentic and to show as much integrity as possible and to be yourself, but then there's the practical need to actually chase those clicks. YouTubers need those clicks. It affects how much money you earn. Being a YouTuber and other similar content creators is not a regular job where you work regular hours and get consistent pay. My pay changes every payday. There are some paydays where I'm like, whew, I can afford to pay all of my bills and essentials. And then there are other days where I get my money and I'm like, and it might be time to open that Kronk's OnlyFans. I could do it, you know. So people might expect booktubers to be objective and show integrity in which books we recommend, but then YouTubers are also being financially compensated if they do it a certain way. I mean, imagine expecting our politicians to be honest and show integrity when they're being financially compensated by, foreign policies and businesses and corporations. That's just not how reality works. We can't financially compensate people and expect objectivity. It doesn't happen. Another aspect of the clickbait thing is that quite simply, indie books and unknown books get so few views. I remember I learnt this lesson. It was a brutal lesson to learn, where I made a video on the Kinetic series by my friend Arbor. It's a young adult dystopian series, and it's really good. And I remember making that video, and it got hardly any views. And I was honestly heartbroken. I remember messaging Arbor and being like, I'm sorry I didn't, help your books get out there. And she was like, I'm sorry I sabotaged your channel with my crappy books, Like, it was a rough thing. But this has been a consistent aspect of my entire YouTube career, is that the more popular the books are when I make a video on them, the more likely they'll get views. That's just the reality. That's clickbait. And why do we click on those things? Because reason number 2, we prioritize familiar books. When people are choosing what books to read, we normally look for the familiar. The more times we've seen it, the more likely we are to trust it and assume it's going to be good quality. This is called the illusionary truth effect. If you haven't heard of this phenomenon before, it basically means that the more times you hear something, the more familiar it feels, and therefore the more likely you are to assume that it's true. So the illusionary truth effect is used everywhere, and I honestly wish more people understood this, because it's a huge thing in politics, in advertisement, in religion. I mean, look at advertisement. If I say Subway, you probably think eat fresh, right? Because you've heard it that many times. Of course, that's not true. If I say Subway, you should think the most overpriced sandwich in the world.
No, you're overpriced!
But the point is, we assume that if we're familiar with something, then it must be true and good and, be of the best quality. And this absolutely applies to books as well. If we see the same books over and over, we will naturally begin to assume that those are the best books, whether that's true or not. But more than that, point number 3, we prioritize familiar stories. People in the fantasy and science fiction genre, we often say, we want new, exciting stories that do great creative things. But that's not very true. We actually read books that are familiar. We read books that feel a certain way and that match our expectations. If the story doesn't go in the way we expect it to, we get very angry at it. A great example of this is from the series The Dandelion Dynasty. There's a scene in that book where a scholar comes forward and says, all of you university professors are all biased. You're only graduating the city kids, where all the country kids, you're failing. And the professors respond with, actually, all of their essays are sent to us anonymously, so we don't even know who they are. How could we possibly be biased and be only promoting the city kids? The scholar who makes this original accusation says, well, it's because you're seeing familiar ideas. You're seeing the ideas that city kids have, and because they're familiar to you as another city person, you assume they are correct. Whereas if you see a newer and different idea from a country kid, you assume that must be wrong. This is absolutely a part of the illusionary truth effect as well, but it applies to the stories itself. If the story functions in a way that we're familiar with, we assume that is a good story. That's the correct way to tell a story. And if the story is really weird and creative and out there, we assume that's a sign of bad storytelling. I mean, a great example of this is the Dark Tower series. I love the Dark Tower series because it's so freaking weird. But a lot of people don't like it because of how bizarre it is and how different it is to other stories. And again, this whole video is just a discussion. It's an opinion-based thing, right? But in my opinion, I do think that as a book community, we tend to punish creative thinking and reward conformity just a little bit more. But let's move on. Point number 4, most people read slowly. This is something that I think booktubers can often forget. I forget it all the time. It's survivor's bias, I can read quickly, so I assume everyone else can read quickly. I recently did an online reading test. You know how you can do an online typing test to test your speed at typing? You can do that sort of thing for reading. I realized that I rate very highly on reading speed. And now I feel really bad about it because I've read books in the past, and I'd be like, wow, everyone criticized this book for being slow, but it wasn't slow. I'm like, oh crap, maybe I just read it fast. I could be biased in that area. Well, booktubers have that sort of survivor's bias on this matter. We read quickly, or we read more often because it's our job. We have the time to do it. But most people don't. Booktubers make all of these top 10 series, yet the average reader probably hasn't read 10 full series. They don't have the time to read 10, let alone read 20, and then select a top 10 out of those 20. I mean, if you, as a reader, choose to read Malazan, well, that's years of commitment you've made right there. So because most people read slowly, we're actually quite limited in our choices. We have to be very selective in what series we choose to invest a lot of time into. I think a lot of people who make top 10 series videos, well, they're really just listening, here are 10 series I've read, therefore they must be the best. I'm not trying to throw shade, I'm just saying this is true for a lot of people. It's hard to get beyond 10. I see this comment all the time on my videos when I do a book review, and people say, boy, I'd love to read that series, but I'm still busy reading this series and then I want to read that that series afterwards, and I've got 3 other series I want to read, and there's just no time. I've been on the series for 10 years. That's the reality. There's so little time and so many books. All right, we'll keep it moving. Reason number 5 why we all read the same books is FOMO. Fear of missing out. This means that we tend to not read outside of what everyone else is reading because we don't want to miss out on the unknown mystery of the super incredible experiences that everyone else seems to be having. People go nuts about certain book series and they're, oh, well, geez, that sounds like a great time. I want to go and have that experience. And we all go rush over there and try that new book. It makes it incredibly difficult to read something that may look good, but you've never heard of it before, especially when everyone's talking so loudly about that series over there. I mean, I'm a booktuber. I read more than most, but man, even I get FOMO very hard when I hear about a series for just one time. I'm like, oh, I've got to drop everything and go try that series. It's a real thing, just saying. All right, reason number 6. Reading outside of Booktube is lonely. This is absolutely an important thing to consider. We read books in total isolation. I mean, that is the paradox of reading, that you read it by yourself, even while you're engaging with someone else's point of view. But this is especially true when it comes to the book community. If you read mainstream books, then you have people to talk about with or other people to listen to as they talk about it. But if you go outside of the mainstream, you are totally alone, and it is an isolating experience. When I was in high school, I was super into The Wheel of Time and Raymond Feist's Rift Force cycle, but I had no one to talk to about it because no one in my class or in my social circle was reading those books. I remember it wasn't until like 2017 or 2018 I finally met someone who had read the last Wheel of Time book and I could finally talk about it. But that's the benefit of Booktube. You can talk to these people and get that connection. Or you can do what I did and just keep talking to your wife about it, whether she wants to hear about it or not, until she's eventually like, just go start a YouTube channel and leave me alone. All right, so why do we read all the same books? Well, reason number 7, big series are very rare. This is something that I think most people don't quite understand, that for a big series like Discworld or the Cosmere to exist, that is the culmination of one person's entire life.
My life's work.
That's usually 20, 30 years of education that goes into them achieving the abilities necessary to write series, and then 20, 30 years of writing all the books. I mean, we look at Brandon Sanderson, he's one of the most prolific authors of our time. He's insane in how fast he writes. But that guy's only got one Cosmere, right? He's not going to finish the Cosmere and then go start a second Cosmere-sized story, right? That's his magnum opus. And that's the reality, that big authors like this have only got one big series in them. I mean, personally, in my headcanon, I thought Robert Jordan had 2 series. You know, there was talk about him going and writing something after Wheel of Time, which was why he was wrapping it up at the time of his death in his late 50s. But I like to think that he would have done one more, but that's just personal fan theory. But still, it's hard for a big book series to go that far. Usually you'll publish 3 or 4 books and then people won't be buying it and it'll fade away into obscurity. Or it just takes so many years to get that many books into a series. I mean, I'm 35 years old and I've got 3 books so far. It took me that long to get up to 3, let alone 12, 15, 20. Yay. So that's why I think so few books rise to the top, is because it takes so much work just to get that far. Okay, reason number 8 why we're all reading the same books. Bigger is better. That's an innuendo. I don't care.
That's what she said.
When people make these videos on their top 10 series, they almost never include a trilogy. They're always much bigger series. One of the few examples would be Lord of the Rings, Greenbone Saga, something by John Gwynne, that sort of thing. But the reason why people assume the bigger series is better and why they get so much popular is because eventually a big series covers every topic. Given enough time, a long series will eventually have every type of plot line out there. I mean, let's look at the Lord of the Rings, for example. Most of the time spent, most of the plot lines in Lord of the Rings are long quest adventures and a big old war. Whereas if you look at Realm of the Elderlings, we have a lot more interpersonal drama, we have romance, we have mystery and big magics. There's so many different types of plot lines over the course of a longer series. Now, normally, if people read a trilogy or even just a standalone book, you'll often get people who'll be like, I didn't like it because it was missing that thing I thought it should have had, 1 star, you know? Whereas if a big series, eventually it will have everything. It's like throwing spaghetti at a wall. If you throw enough spaghetti, eventually most of it's gonna stick.
Spaghetti angel!
So I think bigger series are considered more popular, largely because they will eventually have everything. Nothing is missing from them. And continuing on that point, reason number 9, the sunk cost fallacy. So if you haven't heard of that, sunk cost fallacy is a phenomenon where people are reluctant to abandon an idea or a project because they've invested so heavily into it. Of course, if they did abandon it, it would be much more beneficial, but they feel compelled because they've already put time and energy into it. It's harder to abandon it. I think people absolutely have the sunk cost fallacy when it comes to longer series because they put so much time and energy into it. It's harder for them to get halfway through a series and be like, I don't want to read this anymore. Oh, it stopped being good 5 books ago, you know? But I also think that's why people will more likely list those books as their favorite, because they kind of got to justify the time they spent on it. I've been saying it for a long time where I think that shorter standalone books, shorter books, and trilogies often are harder to write because you got to be succinct and efficient with your plot lines, and you got to get to the point quicker. But people who read them can be a little bit more judgmental about them because they feel like it's missing something. There was a bit of overlap there between points 8 and 9, but let's continue. Oh, number 10 is going to be everyone's favorite point. Why do we all read the same books? Because they're all written by white men. Yeah, everyone's going to love this favorite topic. But look, this is a factor we got to consider. When Nick listed the top 17 series that everyone talks about, 15 of those were by white men. This is absolutely a factor that we got to consider. Now, to be clear, this is not just saying the YouTubers who choose these lists are clearly racist and biased, because they're only picking the white men. That's not the case at all. I think it's a matter of, in order for a book series to exist that's good enough to make a top 10 list, the author of that series needs access to higher education, they need publishing contracts, and they need readers to show up in the early days of their series so they can actually gain the popularity and success they need to write a full-length 20-year series. And that's why I genuinely think, in my opinion, that there are fewer of these series written by women or people of color because there are so many glass ceilings they've got to break through to get that far. To be clear though, this is a whole bloody complicated topic, and I'm really just skimming the surface of it for this video. I just want to get you thinking about these ideas. But I want to continue from there. The other factor is that the algorithm is constantly promoting information to you and all of us based on your demographic. This happens across all social media platforms and including YouTube. As a man in my 30s, I get recommended content that is popular among men in their 30s. It's one of the reasons why there is such a strong cultural divide, is because we are seeing content that depicts entirely different realities. But it means that most of you will follow content creators who are of a similar age and demographic to you. It means it's very easy for us to start following people who only look like us and present ideas that are similar to our own. For example, earlier this year I was pitching my books to other booktubers. Do you want to read my book and review it, sort of thing. And when I started manually searching for booktubers, I found all of these women who I'd never seen before, and all of them had so many followers. I'm like, how have I never seen you before? But the reality is YouTube just did not show me their accounts because I'm a male.
A white man? No!
Algorithms and corporations are constantly pushing all of us into categories based on race and gender. And the only way to escape all that pressure to go into the box they want us into is to deliberately and intentionally read outside of that box. But again, that's a complex topic, probably worth its own video, and I'm just touching on it lightly to get you thinking. But moving on, reason number 11 why we're all reading the same books is because publishers choose bestsellers even before publication. There are books that are just selected to have huge marketing campaigns before they're even out the gate. Classic example, most recent example, would be Fourth Wing. That book was absolutely selected for the bestseller list by the publisher, and they invested very heavily into getting that book out there. But this is very true. Across the board, a lot of these bestsellers are chosen by the publishers for their potential. They may not necessarily be the best or have the highest quality, but they may be the most marketable. There's often a false belief around fame that if something's famous, it must be of high quality. If it's of low fame, it's of low quality. And even then, fame is one of the most random, inconsistent social phenomenons out there. There's no way that fame reflects quality ever. It never happens. Sometimes they line up. Sometimes really famous things are of actually good quality, but then you'll get plenty of people who also say, oh, that's overrated. And then you'll get other series that are underrated. It's just not a good way to accurately measure something's quality, especially when publishers and more powerful corporations have the ability to make something famous, for the most part. All right, reason number 12, meritocracy. What if these books are constantly on the top 10 list because they just are the best? That is absolutely a possibility we should consider. One thing you'll notice about the books that are constantly listed as the best on top 10 videos is that they're usually representative of what's popular at the time. that these books that we're talking about are peak fantasy culture of the 2020s. After all, we don't see people talking very often about books that were very popular in the 70s through to the 90s, because that might feel dated now. Maybe these books truly are a reflection of our culture in this time and era. And who knows, maybe in 20, 30 years, that top 10 list will be completely different again, because trends will come and go. That's one of the reasons why I said at the start, I don't want to discredit any of these books, and I absolutely want to celebrate the ones that get up to the top spaces, because I think for the most part, they have earned their way there. But we also need to consider all the other factors that might have kept other series out of the limelight in the same way. All right, and final reason, number 13. Remember everyone, Booktube is a corner of the market, not the whole thing. Earlier this year, I was talking to the author Michael R. Miller, author of the Songs of Chaos series, and I was asking him questions about advertising indie books. And he told me that he was able to find success as an indie author before he had any presence of any kind on Booktube. And this just kind of blew my worldview. I'm like, but I'm a Booktuber, aren't we the center of the universe? No, we're really not. This is the thing, Booktube is loud, we're passionate, and we are a devoted corner of the book market, but we are not the full picture. So don't be distracted by the glitz, glamour, and glory that is Booktube. In reality, most Booktubers are just some random person with a couple $100 worth of equipment talking about their opinion and then posting it. Think of the book market as the solar system. There are many planets of Booktube, BookTok, Bookstagram, and all the other publishing houses and reviewers and Goodreads, Amazon pages, all of that stuff all makes up the big picture. Booktube is a big corner of it, but we're not the whole solar system. We're just Uranus. Hey. And guys, I've got one bonus point for you today. It's totally not even mine. I was chatting with Lady Bookborn earlier this week, and in casual conversation, I mentioned I was working on this video, and she goes, "Oh, don't forget," and then lists this really brilliant point, which I didn't think of, which is so galling. Don't you hate that? But so full credit to Ms. Bookborn here. So point number 14, remember, Booktube attracts a certain personality. So this is definitely a factor you got to consider, is that a lot of jobs out there in the world will attract certain personalities. So like charity workers or healthcare workers attract compassionate personalities, and surgeons and CEOs attract psychopathic personalities. Well, in the same way, Booktube and other content creators attract people who, I don't want to generalize, but I find they're uniquely passionate, they're very driven, or they love criticizing the crap out of everything. So you've absolutely got to consider that the people who review these books have a certain personality, and therefore they like the books that appeal to that certain personality. So that is absolutely a bias you got to consider. Thank you, Miss Bookborn. So I want to encourage you all, remember, by all means, listen to Booktube. Listen and use it as a resource. Let it help you get you thinking and try and do other books. But don't get too swept up in influence culture. Remember to think for yourself. Remember that all the data you see online will always be filtered through different biases, through different algorithms. Trust your own self at the end of the day. Ultimately, I want to encourage you to read whatever you want. This has been the message on my channel since like the very first video, read whatever you want. If you want to read the big popular series that everyone else is reading, absolutely, go for it. Good. If that's what gets you reading and makes you have fun with reading, then do it. And if you want to go outside of the box, then absolutely do that instead. Try not to limit your thinking to what everyone else is saying. Don't get swept up in the echo chamber. Don't swallow everyone else's opinions. Remember to think for yourself and to think critically for yourself. Well, that's all for my prepared remarks. I mean, ultimately, there are probably many other things I haven't touched on just yet, and there's probably many things that you can think of that might have influenced why we all read the same books. By all means, let me know, and let's have a kind and pleasant, respectful conversation about it. This is an opinion piece, of course. This is a discussion piece. I would love to hear from you and your thoughts. Guys, if you want to support the work I'm doing, I'm an author myself. I've got my own trilogy, The Immortal Investigations, an urban fantasy with monsters, magic, and mystery. I hope you'll check it out. I also have an online shop, Rainbow Space Unicorn, with book bags, book pins, and a whole bunch of t-shirts. And I have my online Patreon where people can vote on my content. I hope you'll try them all out. Otherwise, subscribe for more content like this. I hope you enjoy a good book today. okay. And if you want to read what everyone else is telling you to read, go for it. And if you want to read and be a rogue, a lone wolf, and do whatever you like, by all means do that too. Just remember that Booktube is a resource that's here if you need it and here if you don't need it. Remember to form your own opinions. Listen to other people, but ultimately make your own decisions and learn to distinguish between outside pressure and what you truly want to read. So I hope you enjoy a good book today, and I hope it's whatever you choose to read. Bye.